Yemen, a nation located in the Arabian Peninsula, has been grappling with internal strife and instability for decades. The country has been plagued by poverty, corruption, and political fragmentation, creating a fertile ground for conflict to take root. The roots of the current civil war can be traced back to 2011, during the Arab Spring uprisings that swept across the Middle East and North Africa. Yemen, already grappling with internal divisions, was caught in the wave of popular protests demanding political and economic reforms. In Yemen, the protests targeted the long-time authoritarian rule of President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who had been in power for over 3 decades. Saleh's regime was accused of corruption, human rights abuses, and economic mismanagement, fueling widespread discontent among the Yemeni population. The protests, initially peaceful, quickly escalated into violent clashes between government forces and anti-government demonstrators, plunging the country further into chaos. As the situation deteriorated, Saleh faced mounting pressure to step down. In a bid to quell the unrest, he agreed to a power-sharing deal brokered by the Gulf Cooperation Council. This agreement, signed in November 2011, stipulated that Saleh would transfer power to his vice president, Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi, within 30 days, in exchange for immunity from prosecution. While the deal offered a glimmer of hope for a peaceful transition, it proved to be a temporary solution, as underlying grievances and power struggles remained unresolved. The transition process faced numerous obstacles, including resistance from Saleh loyalists within the government and the military. The Houthis, a Zaidi Shia rebel group from northern Yemen, exploited the power vacuum to expand their control over territory in the north. The Houthis, who had been engaged in sporadic armed conflicts with the Yemeni government since 2004, capitalized on the political turmoil to advance their own interests. The Houthi advance on the capital Sana'a in September 2014 marked a turning point in the conflict, pushing Yemen into a full-blown civil war. The Houthis, allied with forces loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, rapidly gained ground, capturing Sana'a and forcing the internationally recognized government of President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi to flee to the southern port city of Aden. The fall of Sana'a to the Houthis sent shockwaves throughout the region, particularly in neighboring Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, viewing the Houthi takeover as a strategic threat, accused the group of being a proxy of its regional rival, Iran. The Houthis, who adhere to a branch of Shia Islam, have long been accused of receiving support from Iran, though the extent of this support remains a subject of debate. Concerned about Iran's growing influence in the region, Saudi Arabia, along with a coalition of Arab states, launched a military intervention in Yemen in March 2015. The Saudi-led intervention, codenamed Operation Decisive Storm, aimed to roll back the Houthi advances, restore the Hadi government to power, and counter what it perceived as Iranian influence in Yemen. The intervention, which involved airstrikes, naval blockades, and the deployment of ground troops, significantly escalated the conflict, transforming it into a complex regional proxy war. The internationalization of the conflict, with external actors pursuing their own strategic interests, further complicated the situation, making a peaceful resolution even more elusive. The Saudi-led coalition's intervention had devastating consequences for Yemen. The relentless airstrikes, often targeting civilian infrastructure, resulted in widespread death, injury, and displacement. The coalition's naval blockade, imposed to prevent arms shipments to the Houthis, also severely restricted the flow of essential goods, including food, fuel, and medicine, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The ongoing conflict in Yemen has triggered one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, leaving millions of people in dire need of assistance. The relentless violence, displacement, and economic collapse have created a perfect storm, pushing the country to the brink of famine. The United Nations estimates that over 24 million people, representing approximately 80% of the population, require some form of humanitarian aid to survive. One of the most pressing humanitarian concerns is the widespread displacement caused by the conflict. Millions of Yemenis have been forced to flee their homes due to fighting, airstrikes, or fear of persecution. These internally displaced persons often live in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, lacking access to basic necessities such as clean water, food, and healthcare. The conflict has also had a devastating impact on Yemen's already fragile healthcare system. Hospitals and clinics have been destroyed or damaged in the fighting, while medical personnel face constant threats and shortages of essential supplies. The lack of adequate healthcare has left millions of Yemenis vulnerable to preventable diseases, further exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Moreover, the conflict has crippled Yemen's economy, leading to widespread poverty and unemployment. The collapse of basic services, coupled with the destruction of infrastructure and businesses, has left millions struggling to make ends meet. The depreciation of the Yemeni rial has also fueled inflation, making it increasingly difficult for ordinary Yemenis to afford basic goods and services. The ongoing conflict in Yemen has had a particularly devastating impact on children, who are disproportionately affected by the humanitarian crisis. Malnutrition rates in Yemen are among the highest in the world, with millions of children suffering from acute malnutrition, a life-threatening condition. The United Nations estimates that over 2 million children under the age of 5 require treatment for acute malnutrition, with hundreds of thousands at risk of starvation. The widespread food insecurity in Yemen is a direct consequence of the conflict. The Saudi-led coalition's blockade has severely restricted the flow of food imports, while fighting and insecurity have disrupted agricultural production and supply chains. The deliberate targeting of farms, fishing boats, and food storage facilities has further exacerbated the situation, raising concerns about the use of starvation as a weapon of war. Malnourished children are more susceptible to disease and have weaker immune systems, making them more likely to succumb to preventable illnesses. The lack of access to clean water and sanitation further increases the risk of disease outbreaks, putting children at even greater risk. The conflict has also had a profound impact on children's education. Thousands of schools have been destroyed or damaged in the fighting, while many others are being used as shelters for displaced families, or as bases by armed groups. The disruption to education has deprived millions of Yemeni children of their right to learning, jeopardizing their future prospects and hindering the country's long-term development. Section 5. Troubled waters, regional tensions, and threats to maritime security. The conflict in Yemen has also heightened regional tensions, particularly between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia views the Houthis as a proxy of Iran, accusing Tehran of providing the group with financial, military, and logistical support. Iran denies these allegations, maintaining that its support for the Houthis is purely political. The rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two regional heavyweights vying for influence, has played out in Yemen, further fueling the conflict and complicating efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The conflict has also had significant implications for maritime security in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, strategically important waterways for global trade. The Houthis have repeatedly targeted commercial shipping in the Red Sea, launching missiles and drones at vessels they accuse of being involved in the conflict or of transporting weapons for the Saudi-led coalition. These attacks on commercial shipping have raised concerns about the safety of navigation in the region and the potential for a major disruption to global trade. The Bab al-Mandab Strait, located at the southern end of the Red Sea, is a particularly vulnerable choke point through which a significant portion of global oil and goods transit. Any disruption to shipping in this vital waterway would have far-reaching economic consequences, impacting global energy prices and supply chains. The conflict has also led to an increase in piracy and armed robbery at sea, particularly in the Gulf of Aden. The breakdown of law and order, coupled with the presence of armed groups operating in the region, has created a permissive environment for criminal activity. Piracy and armed robbery at sea not only pose a threat to the safety of seafarers, but also disrupt trade and increase shipping costs, further hindering Yemen's economic recovery. Section 6. The struggle for peace, UN peacekeeping efforts and obstacles encountered. The United Nations has been actively involved in efforts to find a peaceful solution to the conflict in Yemen since its outbreak. The UN Security Council has passed numerous resolutions calling for a cessation of hostilities, access for humanitarian aid, and a resumption of political negotiations. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen has been working tirelessly to mediate between the warring parties, facilitate dialogue, and build consensus on a political roadmap for peace. Despite these efforts, achieving a lasting peace in Yemen has proven to be an elusive goal. The conflict's complexity, fueled by deep-rooted grievances, regional rivalries, and the involvement of multiple armed groups, has made it challenging to find common ground and build trust between the warring parties. One of the major obstacles to peace is the lack of trust between the warring parties. Years of fighting characterized by atrocities, human rights violations, and broken promises have created a deep sense of mistrust and animosity. This lack of trust makes it difficult to reach agreements, as each side fears that the other will not honor its commitments. Another challenge is the fragmentation of the conflict. The presence of multiple armed groups, each with its own agenda and interests, complicates efforts to reach a comprehensive peace agreement. Some of these groups are not directly involved in the UN-led peace process, while others may be spoilers, seeking to undermine any agreement that does not meet their demands. Section 7, Fragile Hope, Broken Promises, Ceasefires, and the Elusive Path to Peace. Throughout the conflict, there have been numerous attempts to broker ceasefires and initiate political negotiations. These efforts, while offering glimmers of hope, have ultimately failed to bring an end to the fighting. One of the most significant ceasefires was agreed upon in December 2018, following UN-brokered talks in Sweden. The Stockholm Agreement, as it came to be known, included a ceasefire in the key port city of Hodeida, a prisoner exchange, and confidence-building measures. While the Stockholm Agreement provided some respite from the fighting, it was ultimately short-lived. The parties accused each other of violating the ceasefire, and the agreement's implementation stalled. The situation in Hodeida remained volatile, with sporadic clashes and restrictions on humanitarian access. In April 2020, the Saudi-led coalition announced a unilateral ceasefire, citing the COVID-19 pandemic as a reason to de-escalate the conflict. The Houthis, however, rejected the ceasefire, viewing it as a ploy by the coalition to regroup and consolidate its gains. Fighting continued, albeit at a reduced intensity, and the pandemic ravaged Yemen, further exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Despite the setbacks, the UN has continued its efforts to mediate between the warring parties and revive the political process. The appointment of a new UN Special Envoy for Yemen in 2021 brought renewed hope for a breakthrough, but progress has been slow. Section 8, The Players on the Board, Key Actors and Their Roles in the Yemeni Tragedy. The conflict in Yemen is characterized by the involvement of multiple internal and external actors, each with its own agenda and interests. Understanding the roles of these key players is crucial for comprehending the conflict's complexity and the challenges to peace. The Houthis, a Zaidi Shia rebel group from northern Yemen, the Houthis have been the dominant military force in the conflict. They control the capital Sana'a and much of northern Yemen. The Houthis claim to be fighting against corruption, foreign interference, and the marginalization of Zaidi Shias. The Saudi-led coalition, led by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the coalition intervened in Yemen in 2015 with the stated aim of restoring the internationally recognized government of President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. The coalition has carried out extensive airstrikes, imposed a naval blockade, and provided military support to pro-government forces. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and its allies accuse Iran of providing the Houthis with financial, military, and logistical support. Iran denies these allegations, maintaining that its support for the Houthis is purely political. Iran's involvement in the conflict is seen as part of its broader regional strategy to counter Saudi influence. The United States has provided significant military and logistical support to the Saudi-led coalition, including weapons sales, intelligence sharing, and logistical assistance. The U.S. involvement in the conflict has drawn criticism from human rights groups who accuse Washington of complicity in war crimes. The United Nations, the UN has played a central role in efforts to mediate a peaceful solution to the conflict. The UN Security Council has passed numerous resolutions calling for a cessation of hostilities, access for humanitarian aid, and a resumption of political negotiations. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen continues to work with the warring parties and regional actors to find a sustainable political settlement. Section 9, A Call to Action. The world cannot ignore Yemen's cry for help. The ongoing conflict in Yemen represents a multifaceted tragedy, with devastating consequences for millions of innocent civilians. The international community has a moral obligation to intensify its efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people and find a lasting solution to the conflict. First and foremost, ending the violence is paramount. The warring parties must commit to a comprehensive and sustainable ceasefire, laying the groundwork for meaningful peace talks. External actors, particularly those providing military support to the warring parties, should use their influence to encourage de-escalation and dialogue. Addressing the humanitarian crisis is equally urgent. The international community must scale up its humanitarian assistance to meet the needs of millions of Yemenis on the brink of starvation. This includes providing food, clean water, shelter, healthcare, and other essential services. Ensuring unimpeded access for humanitarian aid workers and organizations is crucial for reaching those most in need. Accountability for human rights violations and potential war crimes is essential for achieving lasting peace. Those responsible for atrocities, including attacks on civilians, torture, and the recruitment of child soldiers, must be held accountable. Supporting independent investigations and mechanisms for truth and reconciliation can contribute to healing the wounds of the past and fostering a culture of respect for human rights. Addressing the drivers of the conflict is crucial for achieving a sustainable peace. This includes promoting good governance, tackling corruption, addressing economic inequality, and ensuring the equitable distribution of resources. Initiatives that promote dialogue, reconciliation, and social cohesion can help to heal divisions and build a more inclusive and peaceful society. The international community cannot afford to turn a blind eye to the suffering in Yemen. A collective and sustained effort is required to end the violence, address the humanitarian crisis, hold perpetrators accountable, and build a more peaceful and prosperous future for all Yemenis. The world must not kill the people of Yemen. Their lives and the future of their nation depend on our actions.